Mary Surratt is led to the gallows with a hood in her hands, while the government insists she helped kill the president. But the loudest question in Washington isn't whether Lincoln is dead. It's whether this woman deserves to die too. By the end, you'll understand what the prosecution actually proved, what the defense wasn't allowed to do, and how a rushed military trial reshaped American justice after Lincoln's assassination. If Mary Surratt was guilty, the state executed a conspirator. If she wasn't, the state executed a scapegoat to satisfy a nation's grief and fear, and set a precedent for how power behaves in a crisis. Was Mary Surratt a knowing partner in the plot to kill Abraham Lincoln, or was she condemned because the government needed a conviction fast? On a warm April night in 1865, Washington is celebrating the end of the war. Inside Ford Theater, Abraham Lincoln leans back in his chair. The play is loud, the crowd is happy. The city feels like it can finally exhale. Then a man slips into the president's box. A pistol cracks. Lincoln's head snaps forward. For a heartbeat, no one understands what they just heard. John Wilkes Booth jumps to the stage. He shouts words that split the room. He runs. Outside, the streets that were filled with joy turn into corridors of panic. Doors slam. Lanterns flare. Hooves slam. Lanterns flare. Hooves pound. The Capitol becomes a trap. And within hours, the hunt for Booth turns into something else. Not just a manhunt. A sweep. A net thrown wide enough to catch the guilty, the frightened, and the convenient. Because in Washington, on that night, people do not only want Booth, they want an answer. They want a reason. They want names. And one of the names that rises fast and strange is Mary Surratt, a widow, a boarding house owner, a woman who will soon stand accused of helping kill the president. But when fear takes over a city, how do you tell the difference between evidence and momentum? At first, there is confusion. Lincoln is carried across the street to a small room, a bed that is too short, a body that is too large. Doctors crowd in, but there is nothing to do. In the theater, people scream. Some freeze. Some rush the stage. Some pray. Some already whisper about conspiracy. In the dark, Booth rides hard. He has planned for this moment. But plans change when reality fights back. And back in Washington, the government does what governments do after a shock. It locks down. It expands its power. It looks for enemies. Soldiers seal roads. Telegraph lines hum. The Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, takes control with a hard calm. He turns grief into action. He turns outrage into orders. By dawn, the city is under a kind of occupation. Passes are demanded. Homes are searched. Men are dragged in and questioned. Someone mentions a boarding house on H Street, a place where actors have stayed, where Southern sympathizers have talked, where Booth has been seen. A woman runs it. She is known in the neighborhood. She goes to church. She wears black. Her name is Mary Surratt. And when the government is terrified, how much does it take to turn a familiar face into a suspect? Mary Surratt lives in a city that is still learning how to be a capital. Washington is muddy in the spring, dusty in the summer. Built on politics and held together by rumor, her boarding house stands close to the heart of power. In those rooms, people eat, talk, argue, and listen. And during the war years, listening can be its own kind of crime. Mary is a widow. Her husband is gone. Her son, John Surratt, is often away. Money is always a problem. Respectability matters. She is a Catholic woman in a Protestant city. That detail will matter later, maybe more than it should. Boarders come and go. Some are clerks, some are soldiers, some are drifters. A few are men with sharp eyes and careful smiles, men who speak softly about the South, men who know John Wilkes Booth. Booth is famous. He is charming. He is also restless. He carries the war inside him like a fire. Booth begins showing up at Mary's house. Not every day, not always openly, but often enough to be noticed. And in a city of watchers, being noticed can be fatal. So here is the first question that hangs over everything that follows. When Booth walked through Mary Surratt's door, did she see a guest, or did she see a plot? The government didn't start by proving Mary planned murder. It started by proving she owned a boarding house. So why did a rooming house address suddenly become evidence of treason? Pause the courtroom drama for a second. Before any witness speaks, the government has already decided what kind of story this trial must tell, and it starts with who gets to sit in judgment. The earliest version of Booth's plan is not murder, at least not on paper. It is kidnapping. A wild, desperate idea. Take Lincoln. Trade him for Confederate prisoners. Force the government's hand, and for months, Booth circles that idea like a man circling a locked gate. He needs help. He needs places to meet. He needs supplies. He needs people who can keep secrets. Mary's son, John Surratt, moves in those circles. He is young. He is politically intense. He runs messages. He knows people. Mary's connection to all of this could be simple. A mother. A landlord. A woman trying to keep a household afloat. Or it could be something else. There is also a tavern, a place in the countryside known as Surrattsville. It is tied to the family. It has a back room. It has storage. It has space. To conspirators, space is opportunity. To investigators, later, it is proof. When Booth and his men move through this world, they do it with the confidence of people who think they are invisible. But invisibility is fragile. And when a plan changes, the past does not change with it. It stays behind like footprints. So when kidnapping becomes assassination, do those old footprints become the same as guilt? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. One witness claims Mary told him to have shooting irons ready, but his story changes depending on who's listening. If his words are the hinge of the case, what happens when that hinge bends? After the gunshot, Washington turns into a courtroom without walls. Everyone is a witness. Everyone is a judge. Stanton wants results. The country wants revenge. Lincoln is dying. Then he is dead, and grief hardens into something sharper, a demand. Find them. Punish them. Prove the government still has control. Within hours, names are pulled from memory, from notes, from overheard conversations, from old suspicions. Booth's movements are tracked. His friends are questioned. His contacts are traced. That boarding house comes up again. Witnesses say Booth visited. Witnesses say he met men there. Witnesses say the atmosphere was southern. Then a new detail drops like a stone. Someone reports that Mary Surratt traveled out of the city just before the assassination. She went to the family tavern. She spoke with a man there. She delivered a message. The government hears this and does not slow down. It speeds up. Soldiers go to Mary's house. They search. They question. They watch her face. And on April 17th, only 2 days after the killing, they arrest her. A widow is taken in a wagon through streets that now feel hostile. As the door closes behind her, the case begins to form in the public mind. Not proven, not tested, but forming. So here is the question. When the government arrests Mary Surratt, is it following evidence or chasing a story the nation is already ready to believe? John Wilkes Booth vanishes into the night, and the hunt becomes a national obsession. But why does the dragnet swing so quickly from Booth to a widowed landlady in Washington? Now rewind to a mundane errand. Mary Surratt leaves her boarding house on a daylight trip that looks harmless, until you learn exactly what prosecutors say she went to arrange. Mary is placed in custody. She is questioned. She is watched. Her boarding house is no longer just a home. It becomes a crime scene. Every chair is suspicious. Every closet might hide a secret. Every visitor becomes a thread to pull, and there is a man who arrives at the house during the search. He shows up carrying a weapon. He claims he's there for work. He says he was hired to dig a ditch. His name is Lewis Powell, also known as Lewis Payne. He is one of Booth's men, and his timing is disastrous. To investigators, it feels like a gift. The suspect walks right into their hands. Mary says she does not know him, or she claims she does not. Witnesses argue over what they saw, over whether she recognized him, but in the fevered logic of the moment, nuance does not survive. Powell is linked to Booth. Powell is linked to the boarding house. The boarding house is linked to Mary. The circle tightens. And in that circle, Mary becomes something more than a suspect. She becomes a symbol, a test. If the government can convict her, it can prove the conspiracy reached into the city's very center. But symbols are dangerous. They are useful. They are also often wrong. So as Powell's arrest inflames the case, one question grows louder. Did Mary Surratt truly not know the man who walked into her home? Or was that denial the first step in a carefully held secret? Mary's son John Surratt is named, then he disappears before anyone can put him on the stand. If the supposed ringleader is missing, why is his mother the one facing the rope? Now the government makes a choice that will shape everything. This is not a civilian trial, not an irregular court, not in front of an ordinary jury. Instead, the accused are sent before a military commission. Soldiers as judges. Rules that bend, a process built for war. The argument is simple. The nation is still in danger. This was an act of war. The conspirators are enemy agents. Speed matters. Security matters. But there is another truth. A military court is easier to control. A military court is less likely to be swayed by technicality. A military court does not move slowly. Mary Surratt is a civilian, a woman, a widow. She will be tried by soldiers anyway. Her lawyers protest. They file motions. They argue jurisdiction. They say this is wrong. But Washington does not want slow. Washington does not want careful. Washington wants closure. And closure is often just another name for a verdict. So as Mary is led toward a military courtroom, the question is unavoidable. If the court itself is built for war, can it deliver justice in peace? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. This isn't a civilian courtroom, and the judges aren't a jury of neighbors. So what did the government gain by putting Mary Surratt in front of a military commission instead? The trial begins. The room is crowded. The atmosphere is tight. Every spectator knows they are watching history. The defendants sit under guard. Their names will be repeated in newspapers across the country. George Atzerodt, David Herold, Lewis Powell, Mary Surratt, others too. Some look hardened, some look terrified. Mary looks composed but drained. She is ill. She is exhausted. She is exhausted. She is also, in the eyes of the prosecution, the keeper of a house where death was planned. Witnesses are called, stories are told. The government paints a picture, a network, a web, a boarding house as headquarters, a tavern as a supply point. Then comes the problem with conspiracy trials. A conspiracy can explain everything. It can also swallow everything. If Booth met men at Mary's house, does that mean Mary agreed with them? If weapons were stored at the tavern, does that mean she knew why? If her son was involved, does that mean she was? In a conspiracy case, proximity can become intent, silence can become consent, and the commission listens, not like a jury of peers, like officers receiving a report. So as testimony begins to pile up, the question shifts: are they proving Mary Surratt's actions, or merely proving that danger once stood near her? The prosecution argues Mary's Inn in Maryland is a weapon stop for Booth's escape route. But what if the route only looks obvious after you already know the ending? Forget Booth for a moment, because the most dangerous person in this case might be the man who testifies, and the price of his testimony is written into his own sentence. The prosecution leans on moments, small moments, ordinary errands that now look sinister. They focus on Mary's trip to the tavern. They say she carried instructions. They say she told the keeper to have shooting irons ready. The phrase itself becomes a hook. It catches in the public mind. It is vivid. It is easy to repeat. But words are slippery. Witnesses are human. Memory reshapes itself under pressure. And the pressure in Washington is immense. No one wants to be the person who failed to stop this. No one wants to seem soft. Mary's defense tries to cut through that. They say she went for money. They say she handled business. They say she is being blamed for the crimes of men. They also try to bring in her character, her faith, her reputation, her life as a widow. But character can be turned. A woman with borders becomes a woman who hosted meetings. A mother becomes a mother who protected a son. A Catholic becomes, in some mouths, an outsider. The courtroom becomes a place where facts and fears share the same bench. So here is the question at the center of the prosecution's story. Was Mary Surratt's trip to the tavern an innocent errand, or a final act of preparation for murder? A key witness walks into court with his own freedom on the line. When a man testifies to save himself, how do you tell the difference between truth and a deal? Then the government introduces a witness who matters more than all the rest. A man whose voice could decide whether Mary lives or dies. His name is John N. Lloyd. He is connected to the tavern. He is also vulnerable. A man with his own troubles, a man who knows that the government is watching. Lloyd testifies about the weapons, about the request to have them ready, about Mary's words. If he is believed, Mary is not just adjacent to the plot. She is inside it. But if he is wrong, or lying, or saving himself, then the case changes. Then the government's strongest link becomes its weakest. The defense attacks him. They question his reliability. They point to his character. They hint at motives. They try to show he is speaking to protect his own skin. Because in a trial like this, the court does not only judge the defendants, it judges the witnesses too, and the witnesses know it. Lloyd's testimony lands. It sits in the room like smoke, hard to see through, hard to ignore. So here is the question. When John Lloyd speaks about Mary Surratt, is he giving the court truth or bargaining for his own survival? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. Mary is allowed to plead, but she's boxed in from speaking the way other defendants can. If the trial is about her intent, why is her own voice so carefully controlled? Switch scenes to the president's desk. where mercy is requested in ink but answered in silence, and the question becomes whether hesitation can kill as surely as a rope. Mary's defense has another obstacle. Her son, John Surratt, is gone. He has vanished. That absence is a shadow over the whole case. It suggests flight. It suggests guilt. And in the public imagination, a mother becomes a stand-in for the missing son. The prosecution does not have to say it directly. The room feels it anyway. Mary's lawyers try to call witnesses. They try to place her somewhere else. They try to show her as confused, sick, overwhelmed. They try to show she was not part of any plot, but there are limits. In this court, certain kinds of testimony are restricted. Some statements are allowed, others are blocked. And there is the larger limit: time. The government moves fast. Too fast for careful defense. Mary sits through it all. She hears her name connected to Lincoln's death. She hears strangers describe her as a conspirator. She hears the word guilty before any verdict is spoken. In the end, the case is not only about what she did. It is about what the nation needs. So here is the question. If John Surratt is the one who might explain everything, why is the government willing to execute his mother without him in the room? Behind closed doors, the commissioners vote on guilt, while Washington demands revenge. In a country grieving its president, who was brave enough to vote not proven. Behind the scenes, the political stakes are enormous. Lincoln is dead, the country is raw, Reconstruction is beginning, and the new president, Andrew Johnson, is under pressure from every side. Stanton wants a sweeping victory in court, a story of a defeated enemy still striking from the shadows. A story that justifies hard measures. The military commission is not only judging acts, it is shaping memory. The newspapers are hungry. They print testimony. They print rumors. They print certainty, even when the facts are still wet. Mary's gender does not protect her. In some ways, it hurts her. Because if a woman can be part of the plot, then the plot feels deeper, more shocking, more monstrous, and if the government can hang a woman, it can show it will hang anyone. That is the message the public hears, not always stated, but understood. So when the trial turns toward punishment, the question becomes darker. Is Mary Surratt being judged for her own choices, or is she being used to prove a point to a shaken nation? A petition for mercy circulates, signed, it's said, by men who still vote to convict. If they believed she should live, why didn't they stop the execution? Step outside the war's shadow. If the war is effectively over, why are wartime rules still being used to decide a woman's life in peacetime Washington? The verdict comes, guilty. The sentence is death. For Mary Surratt, the word hits like a physical blow. A woman is to be hanged by the United States government, not for firing a gun, not for holding a knife, but for helping, for sheltering, for arranging, for knowing. Her lawyers scramble. They file appeals. They push for a civilian court. They argue that a military commission cannot execute a civilian. They reach for a writ of habeas corpus. They reach for a judge's. They reach for the last thin wires that might hold her above the drop. But the machinery of the state is already moving. Orders are signed. Schedules are set. Guards are posted. In those final days, Mary's supporters gather petitions. They plead for mercy. They plead for commutation. They plead for life imprisonment. There is talk that even members of the commission recommend mercy. Talk that the sentence is too severe. The papers argue. The city argues. The nation watches. So here is the question. When a death sentence feels inevitable, does mercy still exist as a real option, or only as a story people tell themselves? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. The requests go upward. toward President Johnson, toward Stanton, toward the highest rooms where decisions are made. And those rooms are not quiet. They are full of anger, full of fear, full of politics. Johnson has inherited a country on edge. He must appear firm. If he blinks, he risks looking weak. Stanton, too, is determined. He believes the conspiracy is wide. He believes the nation must see punishment. Mary's name becomes part of that calculation. Not just a defendant, a symbol. There are stories later. Stories about whether Johnson even saw all the pleas, about whether recommendations for mercy were ignored, about whether papers were withheld. The historical record leaves room for argument. And in that room, doubt grows, because if mercy was recommended and not delivered, then we are not only talking about law, we are talking about power. So here is the question. Who decided Mary Surratt had to die? And what did they believe her death would accomplish? Mary's defenders insist she's being punished for her son's choices, not her own. But what single sentence, spoken on a single day, could be enough to hang her? July 7, 1865. At the old Arsenal Penitentiary in Washington, a gallows is built. The day is hot. The crowd is controlled, but it is a crowd all the same. Mary Surratt is brought out. She is dressed in black. She is weak. She is supported as she walks. Lewis Powell, David Herold, George Atzerodt. They stand with her. 4 condemned. 4 lives reduced to a few final minutes. The government has turned punishment into ceremony. There are guards. There are witnesses. There are witnesses. Mary is placed under the hood. Ropes are adjusted. Hands are bound. In the final moments, the air feels thick. Not just with heat, with the weight of what is about to happen. And then the trap is sprung. The bodies drop. History tilts. Mary Surratt becomes the first woman executed by the federal government. But execution ends a life. It does not end an argument. So here is the question that survives the fall of the trap. Did the government just punish a conspirator? Or did it execute a woman to satisfy a nation's hunger for someone to blame? Years later, John Surratt finally faces a civilian jury for the same conspiracy. If the system could wait for him, why couldn't it wait for her? Hold on to one uncomfortable detail. The strongest evidence against Mary isn't a weapon or a letter. It's a handful of remembered words, and the court treats them like gunfire. After the hanging, the debate begins immediately. It never really stops. Some people say the case is clear. They point to the meetings. They point to the trip to the tavern. They point to the weapons. They point to Powell appearing at her door. Others say the case is built on inference. They point to the gaps. They point to unreliable witnesses. They point to the speed of the commission. They point to the choice to avoid civilian court. Mary's supporters insist she was used, that she was condemned because her son escaped, that her boarding house made her convenient. And there is another layer: religion, prejudice. The way a Catholic widow could be painted as secretive, the way a woman could be cast as morally corrupt simply because men visited her house. The story becomes a mirror. People look into it and see what they already believe about the war, about traitors, about women, about authority. And yet, one fact remains: Lincoln is dead. The country is changed, and the government did bring down a network of conspirators. So here is the question. If Mary Surratt was innocent, how did a system built to find truth become so certain it could kill her? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far. And the one detail that still doesn't fit. Years pass, and the missing son returns to the story. John Surratt resurfaces. He is captured. He faces a civilian trial. Now, at last, the man whose name hovered over Mary's fate is in a courtroom. And the legal atmosphere is different. The war has cooled. The hunger for immediate vengeance is not the same. In this trial, questions are asked more slowly. Rules matter more. Standards of proof feel heavier. And the outcome is not the one that brings closure. The case does not end with a clean verdict that seals history. It fractures. It stalls. It becomes complicated. For many, that complication is the point. If the son's case cannot be nailed down, what does that say about the mother's execution? For others, it proves the opposite. That conspirators can slip free when courts move too cautiously. That the military commission was necessary. John Surratt's story does not end the argument. It feeds it. So here is the question. If the government could not secure the same kind of finality against John Surratt, what does that suggest about the certainty it claimed when it hanged Mary? The Mary Surratt case becomes a lesson that Americans keep relearning. In moments of national trauma, the law stretches. It is asked to do two jobs at once: to find truth and to restore order. Sometimes those goals align. Sometimes they collide. The government wanted to show strength. A wounded nation wanted to see punishment. And a military commission offered both. But justice is not only about outcomes. It is about process, about safeguards, about doubt being allowed to exist. Mary Surratt's defenders say doubt was treated as disloyalty. They say her trial was built to confirm a conclusion. Her critics say the conspiracy was real. That women can be guilty too. That her home was not an accident, and somewhere between those positions sits the human truth. A widow, caught in the wake of history, judged by a system built for wartime. Her name is still spoken because the case will not settle. It stays alive because it asks what we are willing to do when we are afraid. So here is the final question. When the next national crisis arrives, will we remember Mary Surratt as proof that justice must be slow, or will we repeat the same rush to